All right, hello and welcome to this training. As you can see from the title, what we're going to be covering today is the loop you don't know you're in. And as you can see from the overview, what we're going to be talking about more specifically is first the overview itself, the loop, the illusion, the fear, the exit, the review, and your action items for the day or the next few days. Now, before we get started, if you want to work with me one-on-one, make sure to book a call from the link in the description. We work with entrepreneurs, creators, professionals, and high performers in all sorts of fields to basically help them master every aspect of their life, meaning health, wealth, love, and self, with one complete system. So if you're interested in that, again, make sure to book a call from the link in the description. If you want this training along with this document, then make sure to join the free community from the link in the description. And if you want weekly newsletters on how to improve in every aspect of your life, then make sure to join the free newsletter from the link in the description. With that said, let's get started and talk about the loop. So there's something you've probably been doing every single day for years, and you know it's a problem, and you've tried to stop, and you most likely couldn't. You've tried screen time limits, you've tried grayscale mode, you've tried deleting the apps and reinstalling them a week later. You've told yourself 100 times that tonight would be different, that you'd put the phone down after 10 minutes, that you'd read instead, and it never stuck. And what I need you to understand is that it wasn't a failure of willpower. Every single attempt you made to cut back was a failure of method. You were trying to resist something you still believed was giving you something, and that's a fight that nobody wins. Now, there's a different approach. It doesn't ask you to resist. It doesn't give you rules or limits or clever hacks. It shows you something about the habit itself that you've never seen clearly before. Something you probably already suspect on some level, but nobody has ever laid out for you plainly. And once you see it, the desire to scroll just goes away. The want itself disappears. And that's exactly what this training is going to do. There's one sentence, one line that makes the entire illusion collapse. You know it's true before you can even argue with it. And after that, stopping becomes the easiest thing in the world. And by the end, you're going to understand exactly how the loop works, what scrolling actually gives you, and the answer will surprise you, and why every fear you have about stopping is the trap itself talking. Once those three things click, the exit is already open and you won't have to do anything to really stop doom scrolling. So something probably happened today, right? Or yesterday, or honestly every single day for the last few years. And it's so normal now that you barely even register it. You sat down somewhere, maybe on the couch, maybe in bed, maybe at your desk during a break, and you picked up your phone. And there wasn't a notification you needed to check. There wasn't really a message you were waiting for. You just picked it up for some reason. And then 30 minutes later, maybe an hour, you put it down and you felt a kind of hollow, kind of drained feeling. Like you just lost time that you can't get back and you're not even sure what you saw. That right there is the exact loop we're talking about. And until you understand how it actually looks and how it works, you'll keep getting pulled back. Now, the way this whole thing operates is honestly so simple that once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that simplicity is actually what makes it so effective at keeping you stuck, because your phone creates a feeling of low-level restlessness, this subtle sense that something might be happening somewhere, that there's something to check or see or to catch up on. And then it offers itself as the solution to that exact feeling. So you pick it up, you scroll a bit, and the restlessness fades for a moment. And then it comes right back stronger than before, which is how you end up scrolling for an hour when you only meant to check one thing. Now, that underlying tension you feel when you haven't looked at your phone in a while isn't natural, right? Think about it. And it's worth really understanding that, because most people assume it's just boredom or curiosity when actually it's a trained response that your phone put there over months and years of repetition. Now, every single time you reached for your phone in an idle moment, you reinforced the connection between nothing happening and check the phone. And now that connection fires automatically, almost like a reflex, without any conscious decision on your part. And the tricky part is you genuinely believe you want to scroll, right? That some part of you is choosing it, when in reality you're just responding to a discomfort that the phone itself created, which is the same mechanism behind basically every habit loop ever studied. Now, this happens dozens of times a day for most people, and each time it happens, the loop gets a little tighter, a little more automatic, a little harder to even notice it is happening. So when you pick up the phone and start scrolling, that restlessness goes away for a moment, and that brief relief is really what your brain registers as enjoyment, as satisfaction, even though you're not actually gaining anything from the content you're consuming. And the relief never lasts, right? It typically lasts for maybe 30 minutes, and then you're back at it again, which is honestly the most important thing to understand here. And the reason it never lasts is that the scrolling itself regenerates the restlessness. So you're stuck in a cycle where the cure keeps recreating the problem. And over time, you need more scrolling to just get the same amount of relief, which is why what used to be a 5-minute check has probably become a 30-minute one, or an hour-long session for most of you watching this. Now, what makes this loop so hard to break is that it's almost completely invisible while you're still inside it, right? And by the time you notice what's happening, you've already lost the time, already spent the attention, already drained the energy, and that invisibility is honestly the loop's greatest weapon. Everyone around you is doing the same thing, which makes it feel completely normal, completely harmless, just something people do. And that social normalcy is one of the strongest forces keeping the loop intact, because you never really question a behavior that literally everyone you know shares. So you look at other people scrolling on the train, in waiting rooms, at dinner, and it basically confirms that this is just what life looks like now, which makes it almost impossible to see it as a problem. Nobody talks about this as an addiction. And that silence gives it a kind of permission, a free pass that alcohol or cigarettes or drugs don't necessarily get, even though the mechanism is functionally the same. And then on top of that, most of your scrolling happens without any conscious decision at all. And that's actually the defining feature of the loop. The fact that you don't choose to enter it, you just find yourself already in it. Sometimes mid-scroll before you even realize you picked up the phone. Now, there are specific moments that tend to pull you in, like transitional moments between tasks, or the first few seconds of boredom, or right when you wake up and right before you sleep. And once you start noticing these triggers, you'll see how mechanical and predictable the whole thing really is. After enough repetition, scrolling stops being something you do and really starts feeling like something you are, like someone who just needs their phone around. And that shift from behavior to identity is where the loop gets really entrenched. And that's exactly why the first step, the most important step, is really simply seeing the loop for what it is. Clearly and obviously without any judgment, because you genuinely cannot exit something you don't know you're in. And most people have been in this loop so long that they've completely forgotten there's an outside. Now, the moment you start recognizing the pattern in real time, catching yourself mid-reach, noticing the restlessness for what it actually is, everything starts to change slowly. And that change doesn't require any willpower or discipline or any special technique. It's just you seeing the loop that creates distance from it. And that distance is where your freedom lives, because the loop only works when you're fully inside it, when you're not noticing it, when you're fully identified with the urge, fully on autopilot. Now, the thing that people consistently underestimate is how much time this actually takes from them across a week or a month or a year. And when you add it up, even a conservative estimate puts most people at somewhere between 2 and 4 hours a day of pure scroll time, which across a year is literally over 1,000 hours. Can you imagine that? Those hours compound, and obviously in ways that you can't notice day to day, but they show up in the things that you never got around to. The projects that you maybe didn't start, the books you didn't read, the skills you didn't build. And when you zoom out, the cost becomes very real and very concrete. Every hour spent scrolling is an hour that could have gone towards something you actually care about. And the painful part is that you know this. You're right? You feel it. You've probably told yourself 100 times that you'll cut back. And it's not just the time either. Scrolling drains a specific kind of mental energy, the kind you need for focus and creativity and real engagement with your life, which is why you often feel tired after a long scroll session, even though you are technically doing absolutely nothing. Now, the drain happens so gradually that you don't even feel it as a single loss. You just slowly become someone with less time, less energy, less capacity for the things that actually matter to them. And you assume that's just how life is now. And the really difficult part, and I say this from experience, is that the damage accumulates so slowly that you don't feel it happening. And by the time you do notice, you've already lost months or years to something that gave you absolutely nothing in return. Now, most people, when they're honest with themselves, already know they scroll too much. They already feel some version of regret or frustration about it, and that feeling itself becomes another trigger for the loop, because guess what you do when you feel bad? You pick up the phone. So if you project the current pattern forward 5 years or 10 years, the amount of life that goes to the scroll is genuinely staggering, and that projection alone should be enough to make you want to understand how to get out. Now, none of this is accidental, by the way. The platforms that serve you this content have spent billions of dollars and employed thousands of engineers specifically to create and maintain this loop. And understanding that context matters as well, because it means you're not weak for getting caught on it. You're just up against a system that was designed from the ground up to keep you exactly where you are. The infinite scroll, the autoplay, the algorithmic feed that learns exactly what keeps your eyes on the screen, all of it was built with one goal in mind, and that goal is your attention. Measured in minutes, by the way, sold to advertisers and optimized relentlessly. These algorithms know you better than you know yourself in some ways, because they've tracked every pause, every like, every share, every moment you lingered on something for an extra second, and they use all of that data to serve you exactly the kind of content that keeps the loop going. And the reason this matters is that when you understand the loop was designed intentionally and strategically by people who profit from your attention, it becomes a lot easier to stop blaming yourself for falling into it, and a lot easier to decide you want out and to opt out. Now, your time and attention are literally the product being sold, which means the longer you scroll, the more money someone else makes. And the system will never tell you to stop, because stopping is against its financial interest. Now, your interests and the platform's interests are fundamentally misaligned. And once you really get that, once you understand that the app is trying to extract as much of your attention as possible, the whole experience starts to feel different. And knowing this doesn't automatically break the loop, but it does something crucial. It separates you from the loop. It makes you the person observing the trap rather than the person stuck in it. And that separation is where everything starts to change. And so the whole thing feeds on itself in a way that most people never fully grasp until someone lays out plainly. And here it is. The phone creates discomfort. The phone then relieves the discomfort. The relief creates more discomfort. You reach for the phone again, over and over and over, hundreds of times a day, thousands of times a week, until the loop feels so natural you mistake it for your own personality. Each scroll session doesn't just satisfy the urge, it strengthens it, which means every time you give in to the impulse, you're making the next impulse harder to resist. And that compounding effect is why people feel like the habit gets worse over time, even when they're trying to actually cut back. Each scroll session doesn't just satisfy the urge, right? It strengthens it. So the brain is doing exactly what it's designed to do here, reinforcing behavior that produces relief. And the tragedy is that the relief is manufactured by the same thing causing the discomfort in the first place. So the reinforcement is essentially training you to stay trapped. And this is why the loop speeds up over time rather than slowing down. The more you scroll, the more you need to scroll, and the faster the cycle turns, which is how something that started as a harmless 5-minute check 3 years ago has now become the dominant activity in your day. Now, the only way to break a self-reinforcing loop is really to see through it, and that's what the rest of this training is going to do. We're going to look at what you think scrolling gives you, we're going to look at what actually keeps you doing it, and by the end, you're going to understand something that changes everything, which is that there was never anything to give up in the first place. This is the same approach that's been used to help people break some of the most deeply ingrained habits on the planet. You don't fight the urge, you don't try to overpower it. You show the person clearly that the thing they're hooked on isn't actually giving them anything. And once they see that, the desire just disappears. No willpower required. We're doing exactly the same thing here with scrolling. We're removing the desire itself, which is the only thing that was ever keeping the loop alive. So let's talk about the illusion. Now, most people who scroll a lot know on some level that they're doing it too much, right? They feel the time loss, the drain, the low-grade guilt afterwards, but they keep doing it anyway. And the reason they keep doing it is that they genuinely believe scrolling gives them something. And maybe it's entertainment, maybe it's relaxation, maybe it's connection, a break from the stress of real life. Now that belief, that sense that you're getting something valuable from the scroll, is the single biggest thing keeping you stuck. So let's actually look at what scrolling gives you, honestly and carefully. The first thing that most people would say is that scrolling is entertaining, that the content is funny or interesting or engaging, and on the surface that seems obviously true. But if you actually pay attention to how you feel during and after a scroll session, the picture looks completely different. Try to remember what you watched the last time you scrolled for 30 minutes. Really try. Like, actually go back in time and try to remember what you watched. Now, most people can't recall more than one or two things, if even. And even those are vague, right? Because the content is designed to be consumed instantly and forgotten immediately, which is generally not how real entertainment works. The sheer amount of content you're exposed to in a single session means nothing really gets processed deeply. Nothing sticks. Nothing actually enriches your thinking or your mood or your understanding of anything. And that's a pretty strong sign that what you're experiencing isn't entertainment in any meaningful sense. Now, real entertainment, the kind that actually leaves you feeling good, requires some engagement from you, some investment, some interaction with the material. And scrolling is the opposite of that. It's pure passivity, which is why it leaves you feeling flat instead of fulfilled. And the worst part is that this fake version of entertainment starts to replace the real one. Because after enough scrolling, your attention span shrinks to the point where a book or a movie or even a long conversation starts to feel like too much effort. And so you default back to the scroll. Now imagine a life like that, right? Where you can't even look at art anymore. You can't read, you can't watch a movie, you can't even listen to music that is not constantly stimulating. And here's what makes this even clearer. The longer you scroll, the less enjoyable it gets. And everyone knows this from experience, that feeling of scrolling past 10, 20, 50 pieces of content and nothing is quote unquote hitting right. Nothing is satisfying. But you keep going anyway because stopping somehow feels harder than continuing. That experience of scrolling and looking for the one good video that will make the session feel worthwhile, that's not entertainment. That's searching. And the fact that you have to search so hard for satisfaction is proof that the satisfaction was never really there in the first place. So compare that to watching a movie you actually love, a film, or reading a book that grips you, or having a real conversation with someone who makes you laugh. Those things fill you up. Scrolling empties you out. The difference is obvious once you start noticing it. Now, the second thing people believe is that scrolling helps them maybe relax, that it's a way to unwind after a long day or decompress during a stressful moment. And this one is maybe the most dangerous illusion of all, because it feels so true while being so wrong. Scrolling is one of the most stimulating things you can do to your brain, and that's the exact opposite of relaxation. Every new video, every new image, every new piece of text is a micro hit of novelty that your brain has to process, and after hundreds of those in a row, your nervous system is more activated than it was before you started. There's good research showing that excessive phone use raises cortisol levels, which is your body's stress hormone. And that means the thing you're using to quote unquote relax is actually making you more stressed, more wired, more unable to genuinely calm down. And this is especially true at night when most people do their heaviest scrolling, right before bed at the exact time your body needs to be winding down. And instead, you're flooding it with blue light and rapid fire stimulation, which is why so many people have trouble falling asleep and wake up feeling unrested. Now, what scrolling actually does is numb you. And numbing feels like relaxation if you don't look too closely. But there's a massive difference between the two, obviously. Relaxation restores your energy. It should. That's what the whole idea of relaxation is. Numbing just suppresses your awareness of how drained you already are. And when the numbing wears off, all that fatigue and stress is still right there, sometimes worse than before. A lot of the time, scrolling is really just avoidance dressed up as leisure. A way to not think about the thing that's actually bothering you. And the problem with avoidance is that it never resolves anything. It just delays the discomfort and usually makes it grow. So real relaxation looks like going for a walk, sitting in silence, having a conversation that makes you feel seen, or doing something slow and intentional. And the fact that those things sound quote unquote boring compared to scrolling is actually more evidence of how warped the loop has made your sense of what feels good. And so what ends up happening is you scroll to quote unquote rest and then feel more tired than when you started. And then because you feel tired, you scroll some more. And the cycle just keeps feeding itself in this way that makes genuine recovery almost impossible as long as the phone stays in your hand, or even in the room, honestly. And over time, this creates a kind of energy debt where you're always slightly behind. You're always slightly more drained than you should be. And you start to think that that's just who you are now. That's your baseline energy level. Someone who's already always tired, when really it's just the scroll eating your capacity to recharge. Now, people who cut their scroll time consistently report better sleep, more energy, better mood, and a lot more mental clarity within the first week. And that tells you everything about what the quote unquote relaxation of scrolling was actually doing to them. Now, the third claim is that scrolling keeps you connected, that social media specifically helps you stay in touch with people. Or know what's going on in your community, or it makes you feel like you're part of something. And this one has just enough truth in it to be convincing, but the version of connection that scrolling provides is so thin and hollow that it barely even counts. Now, most of what people call quote unquote connection on social media is actually just passive observation, right? You don't actually connect, you just observe what's happening. Watching other people's highlight reels, reading their updates, seeing their photos, and none of that really involves the actual ingredients of real human connection like vulnerability, reciprocity, presence, or even genuine attention. What it often produces instead is comparison. This quiet measuring of your life against the curated version of other people's lives, and not the good kind of comparison where you become motivated because of it to change your own life. The worst kind of comparison where you actually feel more sad because your life is not up to par. And that comparison almost always leaves you feeling worse, which is the opposite of what connection is supposed to do. And study after study has confirmed that heavy social media use correlates with increased loneliness. And at some point, you have to take that data seriously, because the thing that's supposed to connect you is measurably making you more isolated, more lonely. Most of what gets posted online is a performance, a carefully selected version of someone's life, and engaging with performances all day trains you to perform too, which moves you further from the kind of honest, messy, real connection that actually matters with people. Now, the really concerning part is that scrolling doesn't just fail to provide real connection, it actually replaces it. Because the time and energy you spend scrolling is time and energy that could have gone towards the people physically around you, or towards reaching out to someone in a real and meaningful way. Think about how many times you've been sitting next to someone you love and both of you were on your phones. These days, you could be sitting with your grandma and both of you will be on your phones. That moment right there is the cost of the illusion, the real connection that was available and wasn't taken. Real relationships require depth. They require showing up fully and paying attention to being present. And scrolling trains you to do the exact opposite. It trains you for shallow, rapid, disposable engagement, which is fine for content consumption, but it's absolutely devastating for human connection. Right? And then there's the last one, which is probably the most honest reason people give. They scroll because they're bored. Nothing else to do. And this is where the framework we've been building really clicks into place, because the boredom you feel when you're not scrolling isn't real boredom. It's withdrawal from the scrolling. Like we talked about with the loop, the phone trained you to feel restless without it. And that restlessness feels exactly like boredom, but it's not. Real boredom existed before smartphones and people dealt with it fine. They daydreamed, they thought about things, they noticed their surroundings, they wrote, they created art, they sat with themselves. That version of boredom was actually useful. It was often where creativity and self-awareness came from. The boredom that scrolling creates is very different. It's an artificial itch that only exists because of the habit itself. So the more you scroll, the lower your tolerance for stillness gets. which is how you end up unable to wait in a line for 2 minutes without pulling out your phone. And that inability to sit with yourself for even a short time isn't boredom, it's dependency. The good news is that this recalibrates pretty quickly once you stop. Within a few days, maybe a week, your ability to be comfortable with nothing happening comes back, and what used to feel unbearable starts to feel normal again, and even pleasant. You'll start enjoying nothing happening. And here's what matters about all of this. When you stop using scrolling to fill every empty moment, you get something back that most people have completely forgotten they had, which is the ability to just be. To sit down with your own thoughts, to let your mind wander, daydream, process, without needing constant input. Almost every creative insight, every good idea, every moment of genuine clarity happens in those quiet, unstimulated moments that scrolling has completely eliminated from most people's days. And getting those moments back is worth more than any reel or short could ever give you. And beyond creativity, there's something even more basic at stake, which is your relationship with yourself. Your ability to know what you actually think and feel and want. Because you can't hear any of that over the noise of the constant content consumption. And the silence that comes when you stop scrolling is the same silence where self-knowledge lives. That capacity to be just with yourself, undistracted and unmediated, is honestly one of the most important things a person can have. And the fact that an app on your phone has quietly taken it from you without you even noticing is reason enough to walk away from the scroll for good. And if this is hitting home for you right now, if you can feel the weight of how much of your time and energy and focus has quietly been going to something that was giving you nothing back, I want you to know that getting your attention back is really just the first domino. I work with entrepreneurs, creators, professionals, high performers who want to master every area of their life, health, wealth, love, and self, with one complete system. And reclaiming your attention is one of the first things we fix because everything else depends on it. So there's a link in the description to book a call, and it might genuinely be one of the most important conversations you have this year. So if you're interested, make sure to book a call from the link in the description. Now, let's talk about the fear. So at this point, you probably see the loop, right? You probably see the illusion. And if those two things are landing, then there's only one left keeping you in it. And that's fear. Fear of what happens when you actually stop. What do you do? Fear of missing out, fear of boredom, fear of being disconnected, irrelevant, or left behind. Fear of having to sit with yourself without a screen to hide behind. And this is honestly the most important section because the only thing that actually makes it difficult to stop is really fear. The actual stopping is easy. It's the fear around the stopping that makes it feel impossible. So let's go through every fear you might have and really look at each one. The first one, and probably the biggest fear, is that you'll miss something important. That while you're not scrolling, some piece of content or news or trend will pass you by and you'll be out of the loop. The social one this time. And this fear feels incredibly real and urgent, even though when you actually examine it, it falls apart almost immediately. Think about all the content you've consumed in the last month of scrolling. I'm talking about specifically short form kind of scrolling. That's why we're talking about doom scrolling, but it can relate to long form content as well. How much of it was actually important? How much of it changed anything about your life or your decisions or your understanding of the world? Probably a very small part of it, or almost none of it. The vast majority was instantly forgettable, and the tiny fraction that might have been valuable you could have found in 5 minutes of intentional searching instead of hours of passive scrolling. Anything genuinely important will reach you through other channels, through conversations, through the news, through people telling you about it. And the idea that you need to constantly monitor an infinite feed to stay informed is just a story the platforms need you to believe to keep you engaged. And honestly, the quality of information you get from intentional chosen sources is so much higher than what the algorithm serves you, because the algorithm optimizes for engagement and not for truth or usefulness. So you're actually less informed from scrolling, not more. Now, there's also the specific anxiety about not being current, not knowing the latest thing, not being able to participate in whatever conversation everyone's having right now. And that anxiety, I understand, but the thing it's protecting you from being slightly behind on a trend is so inconsequential in the actual context of your life that it's almost funny when you see it clearly. Trends move so fast now that even if you scroll for 4 hours a day, you still can't keep up with everything. which means you're already missing most of it, and somehow your life continues to function perfectly fine despite of that. The things that actually matter in your life, your health, your relationships, your work, your personal growth, none of those things are affected by whether you saw a trending video or not. And deep down, you already know that. Like, I don't have to be telling you any of this. 5 years from now, you will not remember a single reel you watched this week, but you'll remember what you did with the hours you got back. And that's the only math that actually matters here. Now, the second fear is that life without scrolling will be boring. That you'll have all this empty time and nothing to do in it, nothing to fill it with. And like we covered in the illusion section, this fear is really just withdrawal disguised as some kind of prediction, and it's worth understanding that distinction clearly. The first few days without heavy scrolling will feel uncomfortable. True, that's honest. That discomfort, first off, was caused by the thing itself. But that's the withdrawal from the constant stimulation, not evidence that your life is actually boring. The discomfort passes. It passes faster than you'd expect. And what's on the other side of it is a version of your attention that you probably haven't experienced in years. People who cut back on scrolling consistently report rediscovering their interests that they might have even forgotten they had. Picking up books again, going for walks, having longer conversations, starting projects they'd been putting off. And none of that happens because they suddenly became more disciplined. It happens because they freed up the time and attention that scrolling was consuming. Now, the truth is that life without constant scrolling is richer. It is fuller. It is more textured. It is more present. And the only reason that sounds unbelievable is that the loop has been running for so long, you've forgotten what unmediated experience actually feels like. And beyond the adjustment period, there's something genuinely valuable about being able to sit with nothing happening, about being comfortable with stillness. And that's a capacity most people have completely lost. But it comes back quickly, and when it does, it changes the texture of your entire day. Some of your best thinking happens when you're not doing anything at all. You've probably had moments where you were just taking a walk and you got a crazy, amazing idea. When you're just sitting or walking or waiting. And scrolling has stolen those moments so completely that most people literally don't have a single unstimulated minute in their entire day. There's a kind of peace that comes from not needing constant input. And it's something you can actually feel in your body, a loosening almost, a settling, quiet that you didn't even know was missing until it comes back. And the beautiful thing is that this peace isn't something you have to build or earn or work towards. This peace that we're all looking for comes from just letting go of this phone. It's already there. It's been there the whole time. The scroll is just covering it up. Now, the third fear is social. The worry that if you're not on the platforms, you'll lose touch with people, maybe fall out of some groups, maybe become the person that doesn't know what anyone's talking about. And this fear has a little bit of truth to it, in the sense that, yes, some surface level social awareness comes from scrolling, but the trade-off you're making for that awareness is enormous. The kind of information you get from scrolling is so shallow that losing it barely counts as a loss. And what you gain in return, which is the time and presence to actually connect with people in real ways, is so much more valuable that the trade isn't even close. You might have to be slightly more intentional about staying in touch, like actually texting someone instead of just seeing their story, or calling someone instead of liking their post. And those intentional actions are worth 10,000 times more than passive consumption when it comes to real human connection. And honestly, if a relationship can only survive through mutual scrolling of each other's feeds, that relationship was already pretty empty, and redirecting that energy towards the people who actually matter to you in real and substantive ways is one of the best things you can actually do for your social life. Now, the deeper version of this fear is about belonging, about feeling like part of something. And the truth is that scrolling gives you a simulation of belonging without any of the real substance. And the more you rely on that simulation, the less you invest in real communities and relationships that could actually give you what you're looking for. The most connected people you know, the ones who seem most at ease socially, most grounded in their relationships, are almost never the ones glued to their phones. And that's not a coincidence. Real belonging requires presence. And presence requires attention, and scrolling consumes both. Every meaningful relationship in your life would benefit from you being more present and less distracted. And quitting the scroll doesn't disconnect you. It frees up the exact resource, your attention, that real connection demands. So you're not losing connection by stepping away from the scroll. You're upgrading the kind of connection you already have, from passive observation to active participation, from shallow to deep. And that upgrade changes everything about how you feel in your relationships as well, and how close you feel with people. A lot of people that say they don't have any friends, they have plenty of friends. They're just too busy scrolling to notice. And then there's a sneakiest fear of all, the one that most people don't even realize they have, which is the fear of who you'll be without the scroll. After years of this behavior, it becomes part of how you see yourself, part of your daily rhythm, right? And the idea of just not doing it anymore feels weirdly like losing something, even though intellectually you know you're losing nothing. Now, this is just habit talking, and habits feel like identity when they've been running for long enough, but they're not you, they're just patterns. And patterns can change, and the person underneath those patterns, the person who existed before the scroll, is still there and honestly probably wants out. Now, the attachment to the behavior feels real, but it's the same kind of attachment a smoker feels to cigarettes. It feels meaningful because of the repetition and not because of the value itself. And once you see through the attachment, it loses its grip entirely. On the other side of letting go of that identity is a version of you that has their attention back, has their time back, has their energy back. And that's a return to something you were always supposed to have. Now, the fear of change itself is real and deserves respect, but the change we're talking about here is small in practice and enormous in impact. And most people who make it look back and they really can't believe that they ever hesitated, because the life on the other side is just so obviously better. Every person who's successfully cut their screen time will tell you the same thing, that the fears they had beforehand turned out to be almost entirely imaginary, and that the first week maybe was a bit strange, maybe it felt a bit uncomfortable, but after that they couldn't imagine going back. And ultimately, this is a choice between a known discomfort, which is the quiet drain of the scroll that you're already living with every day, and an unknown discomfort, which is a few days of adjustment. When you frame it that way, the decision becomes pretty clear, right? So if you're sitting here right now and you can feel the fears losing their grip, if you can see the loop and the illusion clearly, and you're ready to actually do something with the time and energy you're about to get back, that's exactly what we help people do. We work with entrepreneurs, creators, professionals, high performers to build one complete system for mastering their health, their wealth, their relationships, and their relationship with themselves. The scroll is honestly just the starting point. There's a link in the description. You can book a call if you want to talk about mastering every area of your life and how that looks like for your specific situation. With that said, let's continue with the exit. So here's where we actually talk about stopping. And if you've been paying attention up to this point, the stopping part is going to feel almost anticlimactic, right? And that's by design. The whole point of everything we've covered is that the hard part was never the quitting. The hard part was believing that you were giving something up. And you're not. You know that now. The loop isn't giving you anything. The entertainment, the relaxation, the connection, all of it is really an illusion. The fear of stopping was just the trap's last defense. And now that you see all of that clearly, the exit is just walking through a door that's been open the whole time. The only thing you actually need to stop is clarity. A clear and honest understanding of what the scroll was and what it isn't. And if you followed everything up to this point, well, you already have this clarity. So what remains is really just the practical side of actually changing the behavior, which is genuinely easier than you think. And it starts with a single, clean decision. Not a vague intention to scroll less or cut back. A clear, definitive decision that you're done with mindless scrolling, that you see it for what it is, and that you don't want it anymore. And the firmness of that decision is what matters more than any technique or strategy. The reason willpower approaches fail is that they leave the underlying desire intact. You still want to scroll, but you're forcing yourself not to. And that internal conflict is exhausting and obviously unsustainable, because you're constantly going to have to fight yourself. This approach removes the desire, so there's no conflict, there's no struggle, there's no force. And this is where our thesis line lands. The only reason you want to see the next reel is because you watched the last one. So the last one you watched, whenever that was your final mindless scroll. Not because you're depriving yourself, because you're done with something that was never giving you anything. And here's something important. This isn't about never using your phone again, or never watching a video again, or going off the grid. This is about ending the mindless, habitual, loop-driven scrolling that eats your time and attention without your conscious consent. Intentional use is completely different from compulsive use, and you get to keep the former while letting go of the latter. Using your phone to call someone, to look something up, to watch something specific you've chosen, all of that is fine and normal. What you're stopping is the open-ended, algorithm-driven scroll session where you hand your attention over to a machine and let it decide what you see for the next 45 minutes. The difference between intentional and compulsive use is control. And control is exactly what the loop took from you, right? And getting it back is what this whole thing has been about from the start. Now, the actual mechanics of stopping are embarrassingly simple. And that simplicity is the point, because every complicated system of rules and limits and screen time trackers is just another way of staying in the loop while pretending that you're addressing it and doing something about it. So delete the apps. Seriously. Not temporarily, not as a detox, because you don't need them. And keeping them on your phone while trying to stop scrolling is like keeping cigarettes in your pocket while trying to quit. You're setting yourself up to fail on purpose. You can still access those platforms through a browser if you genuinely need to, but the friction of opening a browser, logging in, and actually going to the site is enough to break the autopilot loop, especially after this training, especially after you know the truth. And that friction becomes your best friend in the first week. Deleting the apps is also a signal to yourself that you're serious about this, that this isn't another half-hearted attempt. And that signal matters psychologically because it aligns your environment with your intention. And you want your phone to be a tool again, something you pick up for a reason and put down when the reason is done. And removing the infinite scroll apps is the single fastest way to make that happen. Now look, you're going to have more time than typically. The time you used to spend scrolling will open up, and for the first few days it will feel weird, like something's missing. And that's where having a few simple, low-effort alternatives already helps. A book by your bed, a walk after dinner, a conversation instead of a scroll. Nothing complicated, just something that's actually good for you in the space where the scrolling used to be. Now, the weird feeling passes within a few days, usually faster than that. And after it passes, the alternatives stop feeling like alternatives and start feeling like your life, the one you were living before the phone took over. Except now you're actually present for it, and you're actually enjoying it. And over time, maybe a few weeks, you'll start noticing things that are hard to explain but very real. Your attention span gets longer, your mood stabilizes, your sleep improves, your thinking gets clearer. All of those things compound on each other in ways that make the old scroll sessions look completely insane in hindsight. And this is what life actually looks like on the other side. And I want to be specific about it because vague promises don't really help anyone. And the actual lived experience of someone who stepped out of the scroll is remarkably different from what the fear told you it would be. Your mornings change first. Instead of reaching for your phone before your eyes are fully open, you just wake up. You lie there maybe for a minute, you think about your day, you get up and start moving without that foggy, already drained feeling that comes from 30 minutes of scrolling before you've gotten out of bed. There's a mental sharpness in the first hour of your day that most people haven't felt since before they got a smartphone. And that sharpness sets the tone for everything that follows. Your day starts with your own thoughts, your own plans, your own priorities, instead of whatever the algorithm decided to show you. And that shift from reactive to intentional changes how the entire day unfolds. Your evenings change too. The hours between dinner and bed stop being a scroll blur and start being actual time you can use for things that matter, conversations, projects, rest that actually rests you, right? And the cumulative effect of getting those evenings, hours, and nights back is something you genuinely have to experience to understand if you don't remember it anymore. Real rest, the kind where your nervous system actually calms down, becomes possible again once the scroll is gone. And the quality of your sleep improves in ways that affect everything else, your mood, your focus, your patience, your relationships. And maybe most importantly, you get space back, mental space, emotional space, the kind of quiet internal room where you can actually process your day, think about what matters, and feel like a person rather than a content consumption machine. So you start being present for the small moments that used to disappear into the scroll. A meal, a sunset, a conversation with someone you love. None of those things are dramatic, but they're real, and real is something scrolling never was. Now, the last thing to address is whether this sticks, whether you can really stop for good, or whether you'll inevitably slide back. And the answer depends entirely on whether you understood the earlier sections, because if you really see the loop, really see the whole illusion of this, really see the fear for what it is, there's nothing to slide back to. If you do find yourself picking up the phone and starting to scroll out of habit in the weeks after stopping, that's normal, and the response is simple. You just notice it, remember what you know about the loop, and put the phone down, and hopefully you delete the app. No starting over, just a gentle correction. So be easy on yourself about it. The habit was reinforced thousands of times over years, and it takes a little time for the autopilot to fully shut off. But every time you catch yourself and stop, the autopilot gets weaker and eventually it goes quiet altogether. The first few days are the most important, and after about a week, most people report that the urge to scroll has dropped dramatically. And after 2 or 3 weeks, it's mostly gone, replaced by a completely new normal and some other habit that feels so much better that going back seems almost unthinkable. Now, long term, the key is remembering what the scroll actually was. Not entertainment, not relaxation, not connection, a loop, a trap, a system designed to extract your attention for profit. And as long as you remember that clearly, there's no temptation to go back because there's nothing to go back to. The platforms will keep trying. Of course, that's their job. They'll send notifications, they'll suggest new content, they'll optimize their algorithms. None of it works on someone who's actually seen through the illusion. The spell only works if you don't know it's a spell, and you know now. And so you're not giving anything up. You're not sacrificing enjoyment or relaxation or connection. You're stepping out of a loop that was taking all of those things from you. Every minute you spent scrolling was a minute stolen from your actual life. Getting those minutes back isn't loss, it's the exact opposite. With that said, let's go over the review. We talked about the overview, the loop, the illusion, the fear, the exit, the review, and finally your action items for the day or the next few days. First, spend one full day noticing every time you reach for your phone without a specific purpose, and just observe the loop in action without trying to change it. And just jot down every time you grab your phone so that you can get a specific number of the amount of times you actually grab your phone for no reason. Because that awareness alone will change your relationship with the behavior more than any rule or limit ever really could. Then remove every infinite scroll app from your phone today, not as a test or a trial, but as a permanent decision, and notice how the first wave of discomfort passes much faster than you expected it to. And then finally, use the time you get back for one thing you've been putting off, just one, whether that's a conversation, a walk, a book, or a project, and let yourself feel what it's like to spend your attention on something that actually matters. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was helpful. If it was, let me know in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you want to work with me one-on-one, make sure to book a call from the link in the description. If you want this document along with this training, then make sure to join the free community from the link in the description. And if you want weekly newsletters on how to improve in every aspect of your life, then make sure to join the free newsletter from the link in the description. Once again, thank you for being here. Thank you for the support, and I'll see you in the next one.